Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm Sana MAQBOOL and you're watching Pakistan TV. Here are the top stories that we're going to be talking about in the show today. The first is going to be what is happening, of course, with reference to the talks in Egypt underway, with reference to the way that the situation is being mediated with the peace talks going on for Gaza, something that Mr. Trump has been backing and saying that this is a possible way forward for peace in Gaza. Whether or not that is the case, of course, remains to be seen. But it seems that the first day of talks ended on a positive note, and Mr. Trump is also hopeful that they may happen. And this is something that is echoed by international leaders around the world, calling for an immediate ceasefire and an end to the suffering of the people of Palestine. There's also, of course, a lot of concern with regards to humanitarian aid being given to the people of Gaza and the kind of casualties and suffering that we've seen in the people of Gaza, something that has been highlighted by Councillor Simon Salim and the stance of Pakistan being put forward as to how women need to also be remembered when we talk about any conflict or genocide. And in the last year alone, 7 in 10 women that were killed were in Gaza. And that is unfortunate also in terms of the sustainable solutions that lack this particular inclusivity of gender. And so it seems that women are the first in casualties and the last to end them. And so that's also another focus that we'll be taking on with particular reference to Gaza. Our next story is going to focus around what is happening in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia's relationship. The Defense Pact is very, very integral, of course, in moving this forward. But there's also concern with regards to what is happening in terms of the economic and investment relationship between these two countries. And it seems that huge investments to the tune of $5 billion is underway, and there will be talks, of course, going on in that, with an upcoming visit by the Prime Minister also expected. And so we're going to be taking a look at what that means. A high-level committee has already been formed to go ahead with these negotiations, but what really will be the future of these investment plans remains to be seen. The last story that we're going to be taking a look at is the statement given by ISPR in an interview with Bloomberg, where he has emphasized that we're not in an arms race with India, something that Pakistan has put forward in its stance many times before as well. What Pakistan has done only is responded to Indian aggression and, of course, also utilized the kind of equipment and the capability that it has along with its partners. But this is not something that Pakistan supports in terms of an arms race and is not interested in any such competition with India. That's going to be our focus in the last segment of the show today. So these are the top stories that we're going to be taking a look at in the debate today. And our first one is, of course, going to cover what is happening in Egypt, the kind of talks that are underway, and really what is the step forward. There was a lot of discussion previously also around what has happened in terms of the flotilla and how so many of the passengers on board, including Greta Thunberg, were detained. And this is also important in terms of how we're going to move forward with what needs to be done about the situation and what really matters. And Greta has some really important statements to make on that front as well. And she has said that they're not the story here. The story is Palestine, and we must remember that. Here's what she said.
The flotilla was the biggest ever attempt to break Israel's illegal and inhumane siege by sea. What we aim to do with the global Samud flotilla was to step up when our governments fail to do their legal obligation. This mission should not have to exist. And this is a last resort. That this mission has to exist is a shame. The global Samud.
Well, you heard what she had to say, and this is important for all of us to remember what really matters here. And we hope, of course, that is at the core of the talks that are going on in Egypt as well. We've been joined by Mr. MUNIR, AKRAM, former permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations. Thank you very much, Mr. MUNIR, AKRAM, for joining us and being a part of the debate today. I'd like your views on when we take a look first at what is going on in terms of the talks underway. It seems that this is being spoken about as the only, or perhaps the last window of opportunity that we have to end the suffering of the people of Gaza. Just today, it's been 2 years since this genocide has been continuing, but we know that this is a problem that did not start in 2023. It has been decades since the people of Palestine have been suffering. And so when we take a look at what is happening right now, do you think that this will allow for a very substantial and a long due change for the people of Palestine?
Well, that is the hope. but I think we have to be realistic. Uh, I think our main priority, or at least the priority for Pakistan and other Muslim Arab countries, has to be to stop this war and to stop the genocide which is taking place in Gaza and which has been taking place for the last 2 years. We have to stop that. That is our first priority, must be our first priority. And our second priority must be to get the aid and assistance which these people in Gaza who are facing famine and genocide, we must open the way towards providing assistance to them. So that should be our objectives at this moment. The larger plan, the peace plan presented by President Trump, um, it is a framework, and many of the issues will need to be negotiated. Issue of the disarmament of Hamas, the release of hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, the governance of the territory and of Palestine, whether it will be a Palestinian authority or international authority. There is the issue of the stabilization force, how it will be created, what its role will be, and so forth. And finally, there is the issue of the creation of a Palestinian state and coming to a two-state solution. But those are all issues on which further talks will be required. I think the focus at the moment in Cairo, it seems to me, would be how to get to a ceasefire, release of the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian captives, aid to Gaza, and thereafter they can move to the other issues. But the priority, I think, at the moment is the ceasefire, hostage issues, and aid to Gaza.
Absolutely, and that is the priority, Mr. Akram. But there's also what we know just happened in terms of the flotilla being intercepted by Israel. And this is a question that is being asked of Mr. Trump as well, as to how he's going to ensure that Israel does not back off from a deal, that Israel guarantees peace, that Israel guarantees a ceasefire. And we've seen that despite this peace plan offer, despite the fact that there was a lot of calls for these negotiations to take place by the U.S. as well, the attacks are still continuing. It's not a conducive environment for prisoner exchange. And of course, just recently, humanitarian aid was also blocked. So when we take a look at what Israel can and cannot do, there is a lot of precedence of Israel still violating international law and doing what it pleases and what it decides to do. So how will we ensure that that does not happen? Or how will the U.S., if they have any influence, ensure that that does not happen?
Well, in fact, I mean, realistically, it is only the U.S. which has influence over Netanyahu and over Israel. Otherwise, so long as the U.S. has backed the Israeli war, Israel has had a sense of impunity to do whatever it wishes. It is only under pressure from President Trump that Netanyahu accepted this so-called peace plan. But obviously, I think you're right. We have to be watchful of what Israel will do. I think that they will be obliged to accept a ceasefire. They have committed to it. They have committed to Trump to accept the ceasefire, get the hostages released. They may then allow some assistance to flow because that is part of the commitment that has been given. But I'm not very optimistic about the long term. And I feel that once the hostages have been released, once the Israelis have the hostages back, Netanyahu may feel free to find some excuse to resume the war in Gaza and to achieve their extremist objective, which is the expulsion of the Palestinians from their own land. But I hope I'm wrong. But there is every reason to be quite skeptical of Israeli implementation of all the elements of this plan.
Absolutely, and that is something, of course, that is very, very concerning. But Mr. Akram, I also want your take on when we take a look at what is on the negotiating table. It seems that there are concerns as to how exactly Hamas will also take a look at this table. Of course, principally, it has agreed to the plan and major parts of what needs to happen, but there are still important aspects that are left out, such as what a Palestinian Authority will look like. Will it completely exclude Hamas from it? How exactly to ensure that will happen? And then also in terms of complete disarmament, will that be something that they'll agree upon? Of course, it seems that the leverage may be small, but these are key aspects on the negotiating table as well. Do you think that that's something that these talks can achieve in terms of what Hamas's role is going to look like in any future Palestinian Authority?
Yes, I'm sure that Hamas will try very hard before it releases the hostages. Hamas will try very hard to retain some assurance of its continued existence. Because once the hostages are released, it will have no leverage. But Hamas is coming under pressure from all sides. It's coming under pressure from the Israelis, from the Americans, but also from friendly countries, because they realize that unless Hamas accepts the conditions that have been set out in this peace plan, there may be no ceasefire, and there may be no hostage release, there may be no aid going to Gaza. So Hamas is under pressure. Let's see how they respond and what comes out of it. The encouraging sign is that Trump has interpreted Hamas's conditional response as positive. The Israelis have interpreted that as negative. So if Mr. Trump has responded positively to the Hamas acceptance, perhaps there is some room which can be found for Hamas to retain some measure of its own survival before releasing the hostages and going forward with the ceasefire.
Absolutely. There's also, of course, a lot of concern in terms of what really is happening around and the humanitarian aid and help that needs to reach there. And we also know that Pakistan, and especially Councillor Saima Salim, has said some very important aspects with relation to that, particularly when we talk about how women are suffering. Let's hear what she has to say, and I'll discuss more on that.
The Secretary General's report is a sobering reminder that 25 years after Resolution 1325, the Women, Peace and Security agenda stands at a crossroad. Conflict-related sexual violence has risen by nearly 90% in just 2 years, while the number of women and children killed quadrupled between 2023 and 24. Women made up only 7% of negotiators and 14% of mediators last year. The promise of Resolution 1325 remains far from realized. Mr. President, the plight of Palestinian women is one of the gravest tragedies of our times. 7 out of 10 women killed in conflicts around the world in 2024 were in Gaza. Homes, schools, and maternity wards were bombed. Pregnant women gave birth under fire without anesthetics or water. Tens of thousands were displaced. Hundreds of thousands now face famine. These are not collateral tragedies, but deliberate crimes that demand accountability. The Secretary General's report makes no reference to the plight of Kashmiri women who for decades of occupation have endured sexual violence deployed as a weapon of war. UN human rights mechanisms, including the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights and Special Procedures, along with organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Medicine Sans Frontier, have documented these violations.
Mr. Akram, the important point to talk about here, of course, is when we talk about how this is affecting women, we understand, unfortunately, how often the plight of women is ignored, the plight of women and children, the elderly, many who are marginalized, they are, of course, affected enormously out of these situations. But what is important also is how then the solutions are guided. And a key point is whether or not women are included in the peacekeeping process, in the conflict resolution process, in understanding mediation, in making sure that these concerns are addressed. When we talk about the UN climate, when we talk about the decision makers, the General Assembly debate, those who are, of course, responsible for making sure these talks progress, are they taking these factors into consideration? Are there women on the deciding table?
Yes, first of all, let me say I'm very proud of Councillor Saima. I think she's a fiery representative of Pakistan, and her statement has had good effect, and I think that's very positive. Look, the issue of women is there. There is obviously inequality with regard to the treatment of women. They are the primary victims in conflicts, so are children. And their role in various formats has been unequal. I think that is true. But let us not forget what are the fundamental reasons. The fundamental problems here are state policy. Israeli state policy of targeting civilians in order to force its way and impose its will on the Palestinian people. Similarly, in Kashmir, it's Indian state policy to impose its oppression on the Kashmiri people, especially the harassment of women and children and ingress into homes in order to humiliate the Kashmiri people, to humiliate the men as well as the women. I think let's keep our eye on the ball, which is how to change these state policies. And whether this change is made by men or women doesn't matter. We have to deploy the best possible diplomatic and other skills we have in order to address these problems. So I've always felt sometimes that Western propaganda, by trying to focus us on the discrimination against women, is taking us away from the real problem, which is state policy, Israeli state policy, Indian state policy. Let us not take our eye off the ball. That is what we need to address, whoever addresses it, whoever is the most effective, whoever is present to address it, we must address it. Let's not be distracted by side issues which are raised in order to take our eye off the ball, to take our eye off the real problems and challenges that we are facing.
Absolutely, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Akram, but don't you think that the problems that are faced by a certain community are best represented by them as well?
Yes, of course, they should be represented. But a Palestinian man whose children are killed, or a Palestinian woman whose children are killed, they are both uh, equally involved in the defense of their rights. And I think we should focus on that, on the rights, not on the medium, but on the real challenges, the underlying problems that have to be addressed.
Right. When we talk about state policy, Mr. Akram, it's important also then to understand who's going to address that issue. Of course, there's a lot that comes from the governments, from within the countries, from within the public. But in terms of the UN, platforms such as the UN, what can they do when state policy comes to mind? You mentioned what is going on in Kashmir, you mentioned what is going on in Gaza, and I agree with what's happening in terms of what needs to be addressed. But who is going to be able to resolve that when a lot of the countries get to do what they want to do despite laws being put in place?
International relations is a game of power. It is through the utilization of all the means of power that you have that you can change policies. And that can be military, it can be economic, it can be cultural, it can be various, all the means that are needed, information, so forth. All the means have to be deployed in order to impact on state policy. And we have seen that when sufficient pressure is brought on a state which is behaving in the wrong way, it can change policy. Smaller states can be persuaded by big powers. But when it comes to states like Israel, why is it have feel that it has impunity? Because it has the protection of the largest country in the world, that is the United States. And that is what gives Israel impunity. So we must address American policy, and that is what we have been trying to do at the United Nations, in bilateral relations, in the Islamic forums, is to put pressure on the US, and it has worked to some extent. We now see that Mr. Trump is putting pressure. It is only because of Trump's pressure that Netanyahu has agreed to this peace plan. Similarly, we have to exercise pressure on the Indians. We have to mobilize the international community. We have to mobilize our friends. We have to mobilize public opinion in order to put pressure on them. And of course, to some extent, that pressure has worked. When India committed aggression against Pakistan, it had no support in the international community because we have been able to reveal the real nature of the regime which rules in New Delhi today. So I think it is hard work. It is not instantaneous. It takes long hours of work, years of work to be able to change the policies of states, and that is the work of diplomacy, is to find ways in which we can change the positions of other states in order to serve our own objectives and the rules of international law.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. MUNIR AKRAM, for joining us and sharing your views about what really is happening in terms of what needs to be addressed and what the key challenges are and how to make a difference in Gaza. And of course, we're welcoming what is happening in Egypt right now, and we hope some good comes out of it. We're now going to take a look at what is happening in terms of Pakistan and Saudi relationship. Economic ties and investment relationships with the country are of huge importance. We've already had a great security pact with the country, but where do we bring in the economic aspect of both Pakistan and Saudi relations is something that remains to be seen. It seems that there are going to be a lot of discussions to the tune of $5 billion investment and maybe more in terms of what both the countries can achieve. A high-level committee has already been formed to go ahead with these talks. What it will achieve is something that we'll focus on in the discussion. And for that, we've been joined by Dr. VAQAR Ahmed, who's a senior economist. Thank you very much, Dr. VAQAR, for being part of the debate today. I want to speak to you with reference to when we take a look at the Pakistan-Saudi relationship. Of course, we have huge historic ties, but especially since the Defense and Security Pact that encompasses a lot of economic aspects as well has been agreed upon between the two countries. What sort of economic potential and avenues that we can further explore do you think have opened up now that we can see in the future, in the very near future, happening for investment in Pakistan and sort of balance off the kind of trade that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia already have, because there seems to be a huge imbalance that has continued for long?
Thank you very much for having me. I think, as you rightly pointed out, the economic cooperation between the two countries goes way back. It is deep. It is comprising of trade, investment, sectoral arrangements, including energy. So there's a lot to talk about in the forthcoming engagements. There are a couple of areas from past engagement which need to be picked up. Firstly, I think the Saudis have shown increasing interest in Pakistan's energy, mines and mineral sector. I think that is where a stronger follow-up is required. If there's homework to be done on both sides, there has to be a reminder of what that homework is so that it can be expedited. Second, we also understand that in terms of trade, Pakistan has been requesting deeper market access to the Saudi counterparts. we have gone to the extent of requesting the Saudis to engage Pakistan in a GCC level free trade agreement. This is where I think we would expect the Saudis to oblige. Having said this, of course, the relationship in the investment arena has to go beyond energy. IT sector of Pakistan has shown increasing prospects in Saudi Arabia. There are joint ventures which have been forged this year and the previous year. And we are hoping that on the back of those joint ventures, there could be Saudi investment coming in Pakistan's IT sector as well.
Right, and that is important because this is something that has been highlighted by the Prime Minister as well, and we have seen that there is a lot of advancement in the fields of AI and IT in Saudi Arabia as well, and particularly when we talk about how that then can be utilized for tech transfer, for ensuring that we are also able to develop local solutions with the help of Saudi technology. Do you think that that's a prospect that can be explored further?
Yes, so I think already if you look at Saudi Arabia's manufacturing industries, they are way up in the value chain ladder. And we need to be mindful that if we have to follow that path, Saudi firms, including the multinationals who have invested in Saudi Arabia, have a lot to offer Pakistan when it comes to areas where Saudi Arabia wants to procure from Pakistan as well. So there can be buyback arrangement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan in sectors which include corporate farming, livestock, food processing. All of these are areas which go a long way in ensuring food security in the Saudi economy. This is where they are interested in, and this is where Pakistan can expand its productivity and output and supply to Saudi Arabia.
What are the key challenges when we talk about these investments? Of course, everyone emphasizes on the potential that exists and what can be explored further, but there seems to be a lot of challenges in terms of ensuring that we truly utilize that potential. How do we bring in more private partnerships? How do we bring in more investment that is feasible for Saudi companies in the country? Which sectors and areas need more regulation, more certifications, more authorities to be put in place? How do you think Pakistan is dealing with all of these approaches to ensure that we really capitalize on what Saudi Arabia has to offer?
Yes, so I think the starting point has to be cooperation between the business federations on both sides. Currently, what we see is a big push effort at the government level, at the SIFC level as well. There are decent government-to-government agreements. Those are big ticket items. Those are also important. But the point that you are talking about has to start small. There has to be a business-to-business engagement which needs to deepen. You have very dynamic city-specific chambers of commerce which need to be contacting or engaging with their counterparts in Saudi Arabia. Even within energy sector, I think the larger prospects lies in B2B, in case of wind, solar, and of course, upgrading of refineries going forward. This, of course, you're right, is easier said than done. And in the past, the difficulty lies in, of course, solving the riddle around regulatory burden at home. We are trying to address that through the Pakistan Regulatory Modernization Initiative. BOI is also, Board of Investment is also working on easing the regulatory burden. They have taken a single window approach to several of the regulations. Provincial governments are also being sensitized on how to cut the costs, transactions cost, the search cost, information costs for the foreign investors. One of the low-hanging fruits with Saudi Arabia is the expat community. Pakistan has one of the largest diasporas in Saudi Arabia. And what we have seen in case of the Chinese example or the East Asian example, that it is usually your diaspora that either comes back or allows for back-end partnerships to take place. So you have over 3 million skilled, semi-skilled, unskilled workers working in Saudi Arabia. I think Pakistan needs to tap into the power of that diaspora and convince them that if they want to engage in meaningful partnerships over here, we can allow for their business, their startups to not just open up, but to scale at lower costs. Of course, they will be comparing cost of doing business in other countries, including GCC as well. So we need to lower the overall cost of doing business in the country.
What about the mining sector? There seems to be a lot of potential there for Pakistan and a lot of Saudi interest as well. And there seems to be a lot that Pakistan also wants to capitalize in terms of investments. But it is something that is very integral and in terms of the kind of nuances involved, very layered as well. How do you see Saudi investment in this particular sector?
Yes, so I think as we know that Saudi Arabia was amongst those very first countries which showed interest in Pakistani mines and minerals, including Reko copper. They have, of course, done their homework as well. There have been multiple visits as well. To my knowledge, of course, things need to be brought home now. There are issues which both sides need to sit on the table and finalize as early as possible. The MOUs are there. Investor visits have taken place. On both sides, the corporate entities who will be engaging, they've also been identified. It's just that final leg, which is the terms on which the transaction has to be packaged. I think the financial advisors should be brought in as quickly as possible before the interest in those previous MOUs fades away. Having said this, we should be mindful that Pakistan's mine and mineral sector itself requires a lot of logistic and infrastructure upgrade. We still need to put in place all of those logistics, supply chain, those logistics arrangements, which take these outputs from our mines and mineral deposits to, let's say, the nearest port city, and then, of course, how to transport them abroad. All of these are arrangements which still need to be put in place.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. VAQAR, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. There's a lot of potential, of course, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia has in terms of investments and trade ties. We've already seen great pacts in terms of defense and security cooperation, but there is a lot at the economic front that can also be explored, and we hope that that is something that can be achieved, and we're hearing reports that that will be something that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia will be seeing move forward as early as this month. So we'll be here to talk more about that as well. We're now going to be taking a look at what is happening with reference to, of course, the statements given by DG ISPR in a recent interview to Bloomberg, where he's spoken about how Pakistan is not involved in any arms race with India. This is with reference to, of course, the recent India-Pakistan conflict, and that Pakistan was only responding to Indian aggression and, of course, utilizing its own and, of course, the technology in terms of the partners that it has in the region, particularly China. But what remains is, of course, that this is not a strategy for Pakistan to be in any part of an arms race with India. And of course, statements that go beyond any such narrative are completely false. It is Pakistan's, of course, own right to be able to defend itself and to respond to Indian aggression, which it did. And of course, the false propaganda still unfortunately continues without evidence that India is, of course, typically behaving in a certain way. What really needs to be done for this matter is to explore where Pakistan lies in terms of this technology and how exactly will it be moving forward. And that's going to be the focus of our last topic today. And we'll talk more about that with our guests, but after a short break. Welcome back. We're going to be taking a look at the recent interview given by the DG ISPR to Bloomberg, where he spoke about how Pakistan is not involved in any arms race with India. For that, we've been joined by senior defense and security analyst, Brigadier Mr. Haris Nawaz. Thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion today, Brigadier Haris. I want your take on how we're still hearing about what has happened in the recent India-Pakistan conflict. Of course, absolutely false statements coming in from India, including the recent one by the IAF chief as well about downing Pakistani jets. And so it's important for the world to understand that Pakistan has very clearly and effectively responded to Indian aggression and is not interested in any arms race. This is echoed by the DG ISPR's recent statement and interview. But I want your take in terms of how this narrative is being perceived internationally and what really needs to be done about the world to understand that Pakistan only responded to Indian aggression and is not interested in an arms race.
You see, sir, the point is Pakistan has told the world many times that we are a peace-loving nation. But please don't take, India should not take our peace as a weakness. And during this Mark-e-Haq, we have amply shown that Pakistan is the most important, responsible and mature nuclear country with very strong, professional battle-hardened army commanded by Field Marshal MUNIR, who I think he has proven the world that he's one of the best field marshal and the commander of the Pakistan Armed Forces. The issue is, and India has proven that India is the most irresponsible country, nuclear country, on just one false flag operation or state drama. They attacked neighboring country, which is a very nuclear country. Imagine not realizing the consequences of fighting two nuclear countries, what happens, and where is going to end it. That is what the world has realized, and that is why the whole world is appreciating that Pakistan never escalated. The moment Trump said that India want de-escalation, we said, okay, we have no designs. We never wanted to initiate war, and we have done our job. And we proved that the Pakistan military is very strong, and we forced one of the biggest army to come to the knees within 6 to 8 hours. That is what we have proven one thing. Then we said we have downed 6 aircraft. The whole world has confirmed. The President Trump said, then French President, all companies, everybody, the reporters, journalists, everybody told. Did ever Indian Air Chief said that they have downed Pakistani aircraft? Never. No one in the world reported that Pakistan aircraft have been downed by Indian aircraft. Right. Then suddenly after 3 months, one fine evening, the Indian Air Chief comes on there and in 45-minute speech, in 28 minutes, show the importance. If they had fallen and showed the down Pakistan aircraft, he would have said immediately that we have done, but we don't know where the wreckage has gone. We don't know the maker type. We don't know the number of it. Just imagine. Now, everybody was laughing of it. And then Pakistan has been telling every time, whatever we have lost, even the day Mark-e-Haq was over, next day DGI said, we lost so many soldiers, so many injured, so many civilian injured, so many shaheed. No doubt about it. We don't hide because we keep the people of Pakistan informed what all was happening. And this is what India is hiding. Till today, they're not accepting boldly and openly that they lost 7 aircraft. This is the difference between Pakistan and India because we have no complexions. We know what we have done, how we are prepared, and what all we do again. Because now the Indian Army, the way they do provocative statements, and they're again trying to bring a lot of destabilization in this region, not realizing we were at the brink of a very serious clash. And I think it was because of Pakistan maturity and intervention of President Trump that it was really averted. But right. Pakistan has told...
Yes, there's also the important aspect of how Pakistan's collaboration with other countries and regional players is also being viewed. Of course, in particular, how Chinese technology was used. This is, of course, and you can help our viewers understand, is just common practice in terms of the kind of defense cooperation agreements that exist and the kind of course, partnerships that different countries around the world have, including, of course, India, in the example of course, the French jets that it had. Unfortunately, of course, they were downed by Pakistan. But this is essentially a collaboration that exists between various countries. Why is it that this is being focused on in terms of Pakistan?
You see, this is another thing. You see, Pakistan has shown that how best our pilots and our ground forces are trained, how they utilize and the equipment which we get. We are fully trained on that. You see, J-10, J-17, then we talk PL-15, how we've been using our Fateh 1, Fateh 2. We used only 2 army missiles. That's all. We didn't use our long-range missiles. There was no need. And we are well prepared. What we have to do now, we are well prepared. And then the Chinese equipment is now well known. And then Indian Chief Army Staff is saying, we were fighting against 3 countries. Yeah. It is Turkey, China, and Pakistan. Imagine you get weapons from all over the world, but then you use your weapons yourself. If you get weapons from France, that means I will never say that France is supporting you. They have sold you the weapons. Likewise, now the world has realized that Pakistan has emerged as a very strong military power. We are now a regional stabilizer, and India is totally isolated. The Middle East is looking towards Pakistan. The Americans are listening to Pakistan. They're listening to the Field Marshal, Sayyid MUNIR, how he went and briefed the White House. Then we went to the Pentagon. Then again, he went to State Department, and he convinced and then these 2 proxies of Indian, PLA and Majid Brigade, they were again declared a terrorist country, terrorist organization. So we have really proven, we have earned our respect. And now everybody wants to listen to Chief Field Marshal MUNIR. Our Prime Minister went to journalists the way he spoke out. And then he's gone to Malaysia. He went to President Trump. He said the 2 great personalities are coming to White House. There's a big difference. Now people are listening, and this is what we have to catch. India is not realizing. We have told now we have established new normal. And that new normal is that now if you go for any misadventure or aggression, it will be from our side, it will be very swift, decisive, and destructive. And we will take this war to your deep territory. With our support of Pakistan, you will remember how much you are going to have economic loss. I think by ISPR has made it very, very clear. That's it.
Right. Right. Thank you very much, Brigadier Haris Nawaz, for joining us and sharing those views. These are, of course, important aspects as to what really is going on and how Pakistan is being viewed and what really needs to be done on the matter. These are important discussions, of course, for the international community to realize and understand with the narratives that India is putting forward and the narratives that Pakistan is putting forward with credible evidence, facts and figures, and the support of the international community, including the US President, who has clarified and reiterated once again that it was indeed 7 fighter jets that Pakistan has downed of the Indian Air Force. Here's the crux of the debate. What's important, of course, to take a look at in terms of the talks going on in Egypt is that whether or not real peace will be delivered to the people of Gaza and that an immediate end to the suffering and a ceasefire is achieved at all costs, because that is what is required. As we speak, the suffering continues. There is, of course, a lot of hope from the potential that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia has in terms of achieving the economic ties, truly balancing the trade between the 2 countries so that Pakistan is able to capitalize on this relationship. And at the end, of course, it remains to be seen what more false propaganda comes out from India. But Pakistan has always made its stance very, very clear and has done so this time around as well. That's all that we have from the debate today. We'll now see you tomorrow.